All right, everybody. Welcome to day 2, session 2 of Job Search Basics. Yesterday, we talked about planning and organizing your job search, and today we're going to be talking about branding and personal value proposition. And Thursday, we're going to talk about resume writing. So let's get started with today. Just a couple of reminders. So we'll skip the introduction. I did an introduction yesterday, so you know who I am at this point. I'll do a little reminder of some class rules. I'll do a presentation anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, either about the presentation or job search in general. So a couple reminders: try to be on time. Mute yourself if you're not asking a question or participating in conversation, just so we don't have cross noise. However, do come off mute when you need to and ask questions. I don't get offended or upset if you ask a question, especially if it's really apropos of what we're talking about. I do ask that we try to keep it on topic. I know that sometimes when we're talking about job search stuff, it can kind of make you have a question about something tangential or something kind of related. So not directly related, I think a good idea is to maybe hold it until the end of the conversation. But if it's really directly about what we're talking about, then please feel free, come off mute and ask, put it in chat. Somehow I will stop and, try and check the chat to see if there's questions. You can raise your hand. Apparently Google has a feature you can just raise your hand and it'll raise your hand for you, which is kind of cool. Try and be respectful of other people. We're talking about something a little on the more vulnerable side. We're talking about job search. Today we're talking about brand. So there might be some things that make you feel vulnerable or make other people feel vulnerable. So we want to be respectful of other people. And to that end, right, we're going to keep our questions on the discussion at hand or save it for the larger Q&A. So with that, we're going to roll right into what we're talking about. These are the two things that I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else about this conversation, is that branding is important for every single part of your job search. And I'm going to go through that on a greater level on another slide, but it basically touches everything, which is why I talk about branding separate and before we talk about resume, because it's going to be touching everything that you do. And so you want to think about it ahead of time. The second piece is around having a personal value proposition, which is similar to your brand, but it's more of a elevator pitch or a verbal way that you're going to need to be able to introduce yourself. And the truth is, you're going to need to introduce yourself when you're networking. You're going to need to introduce yourself in interviews. So it's a good idea to have a really good, clear, crisp, and concise way that you're going to talk about yourself to other people. So we'll talk about that in greater detail of what that means and how to do that in an effective way. Okay, so why is personal branding so important? It's because it touches everything that you're doing in your job search. It's foundational to what you're doing. So I mentioned you need to have an elevator pitch, right? What are you going to tell other people about yourself? Well, you need to know your brand in order for you to tell people, what are you good at? What do you like doing? What have you done? What jobs do you want to do? In order to be able to effectively communicate yourself to others, you need to have thought about it a little bit. You need to be able to verbalize what it is you're about. It's definitely going to come into play in your resume, in cover letters, any marketing material that you put out about yourself, LinkedIn profile, when you're talking in interviews, when you're networking with other people, and even really the story that you're telling yourself about things, right? Telling yourself what you're good at, realigning yourself with your values and your vision for your career. it can be motivating if you're reminding yourself of the things that you're good at and the things that you're passionate about. So that's why we're talking about it today, because it's just the foundation, it's the underpinning of everything you're going to do from this day forward in relation to your job search. So it's worth taking a little bit of time. Now, I'm going to say you need to do deep work to kind of think about your personal brand. We're just not talking about the weather, right? We're doing a little bit more. We're going a little bit deeper down. This is not soul searching, right? I'm not saying you need to necessarily go sit on a mountain in Tibet and think about your meaning of your life before you put your personal brand. But you need to do some deep work to uncover what makes you different, what makes you special, and get okay with those things so that you can present your best possible self to others. But I'm not saying that you need to spend, a week or a month figuring that out necessarily. I think you could probably do a couple of hours tops, kind of digging a little bit deeper below the surface to get a sense of what you're about, and then you can move along and do these other things. I'm not recommending that you need to go and become an expert in personal marketing necessarily in order to accomplish this. And like I said yesterday, we're kind of looking at getting 1% better every day in our job search, not necessarily thinking that we need to have it all together and figured out on day one, but we're kind of iterating and getting better as we go. And the brand can be that as well. Okay, so I want to do a little exercise real quick, and you can, if you have something on hand, like a pen and a piece of paper real quick, or you could pull up a Word document or note document real quick. But what I want to do is this little exercise to get you thinking about what branding actually means. And so grab a pen and a piece of paper, and I'm going to give you a couple of prompts, and we'll move along, and it'll, I think, kind of help things gel with you a little bit. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to take your pen and paper or your keyboard or whatever, and I want you first in your mind, think about someone that you admire and you respect. And you don't have to write down their name, but just think about a person that you admire and you respect. And what I want you to do is write down 2-3 words that you would use to describe that person. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Write down 2 or 3 words that you would use to describe someone that you admire and you respect. Okay. If you have a couple of words, if you thought about that person, you have a couple words, if you wouldn't mind jumping into chat and sharing one of those words, sharing a couple of those words that you would use to describe someone you admire and you respect. Ethical, strong, dedicated, smart, driven, trailblazer, competent, eloquent. We like smart people. Determined, trustworthy. That's very, very important. Wise, ahead of time, relentless, sharp thinking, integrity, kind, and positive. Okay, those are all really great words, right? Those are integrity's coming up over and over again. That's makes sense. Me too. Okay, so now what I want you to do, I want you to think about the opposite now. I want you to think about, and again, we don't want any names. I want you to think about somebody who you don't admire and you don't respect. Think about that person without naming names. And I want you to write down on your pad 2 or 3 words that come to your mind when you think of somebody you do not admire and do not respect. And I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. We're already going in the chat. Slimy liar, dishonest. I think dishonest is going to come up a lot. Unreliable, fake, vapid, shady, not transparent, disrespectful, rude, self-centered, cruel, disconnected. Oh, a criminal. Instigator of bad things. Oh, I love that one, Kim. Bad, rude, not reflective. So somebody who's not self-aware, narcissistic. Okay. So thank you, everybody. This is great. So this is a great example of what branding is. This is what it is. What bubbles up for you when you see people, when you think of people, those words, those become brands, right? I went and Googled who are the most famous people, and these four came up as being four of the most famous people, and they elicit responses, right? You have a thought in your mind of words of what you think of those people. Some of them might be positive, some of them might be negative, and some of them might be really strong. But this is what personal branding is. And so the name of the game for you is to think about what you are known for. And you actually have a little bit of control over this. You can prescribe some of what people think about you. It's not that you're just living out in the world and people think what they're going to think. Sometimes that can be a little bit the case, but you have a little bit of control over it. And that is what personal branding is. It's figuring out what you want to be known for and putting that out there in the world so that people can think the positive things that you want them to think about you. So I really like this quote here. Personal branding is essentially the ongoing process of establishing a prescribed image in the mind of others. So I've got it in all caps here, prescribed image. When you're prescribing something, you're giving something to somebody, right? So you're giving them an image in their mind and other people's mind of what you are like, and you have control over that to some degree. And so you're going to try and focus on getting that prescribed image into the mind of other people in the language that you use about yourself. So when we're talking about personal branding for work, what we want to do is try and make it authentic, compelling, and targeted. So when I talk about authentic on this slide, what I'm really just saying is to generally be truthful, right? To be honest. I think authentic has kind of gotten used so much at this point in the world that it's almost a little bit of a meaningless word. And the truth is, it's questionable to what degree we really can be authentic at work. So when I use that word, I really mean to be generally honest. And so I'll give some examples of that. Like if I say that I am a punctual person, punctual being somebody who's on time, I hate to be late. I hate it so much. I would rather be an hour early to something than to be 2 minutes late. I just really dislike it. So I will do anything in my power to always be on time. However, have I always been on time every single time in my life? No, because things come up in life, traffic, you lose track of time, lots of things get in the way. But generally speaking, I can say that I'm a punctual person because it's my drive to always be on time whenever possible. However, if you are not on time, if you're somebody who struggles with the clock and you're repeatedly late, then it is not honest to say that you are punctual because that's something that you struggle with it. And hey, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, but I just want to point out when I say authentic, like be truthful on your resume, be honest, take ownership of your qualities and your qualifications, but just make sure that it really is speaking to who you really are. Compelling, right? We're focusing on, in the case of looking for work, the positive things about you, right? You're punctual, you're detail oriented, the things that are interesting to other people, and especially for that hiring manager who's looking for a qualified candidate. what are your qualities that they're looking for, right? And that's where the targeted comes in as well. You have some very specific qualities that are going to make you a really good fit for some particular roles. So you want to make sure that you know what they are, that they're compelling ones, and then you're speaking directly to a specific audience. You're not necessarily speaking to everybody. You're speaking to a particular audience. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on another slide, because I think one of the traps that people fall into a lot of times is that they water themselves down, because we're human beings. We want to be liked. We don't like to be disliked. And so we try to kind of bend ourselves in a pretzel to make ourselves really likable for everybody. And the problem there is that you are not really focused with your message. You're not targeted. And so some specific hiring manager that you might actually be a really good fit for their role, there's too much noise on your resume because you tried to list everything and say that you're good at everything. And you might be good at everything, but you're probably better at some very specific things. So targeting is really important. Okay. So now I kind of defined a little bit about what branding is. We talked a little bit about why it's important. So we can maybe talk a little bit more about how to kind of develop one, how to do it. So a good place to start is just by doing some self-evaluation, right? So for example, can you maybe take 10 minutes, grab a pen and paper or a Word document? I like writing things out by hand. I think it's a little bit better for your brain, but however it works best for you. Can you sit down for 10 minutes and answer these questions for yourself, right? What are your top 3 strengths? What are those 3 things that you're really, really good at? And by the way, a lot of times I think people discount their strengths because they think if they're good at it, somehow everybody's good at it. And that's not true. So we kind of diminish ourselves a little bit. And I'll use an example. Like, I have a friend, Darren, who is just an absolute wizard at Excel spreadsheets. I mean, there's nothing this dude, I'm pretty sure he could build wedding invitations in Excel. He's so good at it. But when I talk to him about it and I tell him that, Darren, you're great, because I go running to him with Excel problems, he doesn't really see it as a strength because it's so easy for him. It's become something that's just easy for him. And so he thinks that it's easy for everyone. And that's not true. The things that you are good at are unique to you. Now, maybe there's lots of people that are good at Excel, but there's even more people who aren't good at Excel. So you don't have to be completely unique, or you don't have to be the strongest person at it ever to still have that strength. What are your core values and your beliefs? This one is kind of getting a little bit deeper, but again, you don't have to go too deep. Just spend a little bit of time thinking about, what is important to you. I'm going to out myself right now. A lot of people have as a core value hard work. They believe in hard work. They value it very highly. I do not. It is not in my top 3 or top 5 or top 10 core values. So knowing that about yourself, what your values are, can really help you steer yourself in the right direction during your job search. What are you passionate about? I don't really like the word passionate, but what are you excited about? What are the problems that get you going, that really pull in your focus, pull you into the team to help you work on solving something? What are the things that are exciting to you? What is your reputation? Do you know what your reputation is on the street? Do you know what other people think about you and what other people say about you? You may not. You may have not taken the time in the past to actually ask that question. And then, are you a good doer or leader or both? Something to think about, right? Some roles require heavy execution. You just need to get in there and you need to get stuff done. And some roles require leadership, somebody to create alignment in teams, to delegate, or maybe you are a balance of both. But it's a good question to ask of yourself and know when you're going in for interviews and you're applying for jobs, what kinds of things that you are good at and what kinds of things do you want to do. So again, it might be worth your time to take 10 minutes, a sheet of paper, and do a free write, just a brain dump, just for you, not for anybody else. You don't have to show it. You can throw it away or burn it, but just answer these questions for yourself. So I'm going to talk about some kind of areas of challenge or areas where I think people run a little bit afoul in their personal branding. The first challenge is around specialization, right? We have two kinds of people in the world generally falling into a couple buckets, either a generalist or a specialist, right? And the world needs both, by the way. We need some people that have really deep knowledge on a given subject, and we need some people who are a little bit easier at adapting to the needs of the situation and maybe have a broader knowledge across multiple fields. And then what that leads to in your career, a lot of times, specialists will generally have a more linear career path, right? They're really good at one thing and they keep doing that one thing and they keep getting progressively better and better at that one thing. Whereas generalists maybe have a little bit more zigzaggy career where they kind of run off and do a couple different things and kind of shift gears. And I'll be honest with you, I know there's a lot of Intel people in this call. Intel kind of does us a little dirty because they use us as generalists quite a lot. I find that if they think that you're good at something, it very often happens that they'll plug you in. Oh, you're a good leader, so they'll plug you in, and maybe you don't necessarily lead a team that is in your area of specialization. And I know for a fact that a lot of times a project manager is a project manager is a project manager at Intel, where I started out in software and ended up in HR, and I got thrown on a lot of projects where I didn't feel that I necessarily had deep knowledge, although I was expected to become an expert. So it does happen for sure. I do think generalists also have a little bit more of a challenge when we're talking about our work, because specialists, it's a little bit more laser focused when you're looking for jobs. Okay, I'm a marine biologist, for example, real specialized, right? So a marine biologist is probably not going to go off and study insects, right? Or go become a manager at a grocery store chain. Whereas a generalist can be more flexible. It does lead us into, okay, where I can go anywhere. So I'm looking for a job and I could do this or this or this or this. And so it leads us to be maybe a little bit less focused, or makes our brand be a little bit more watered down because we've done so many things. And so it makes it a little bit harder for us to sell ourselves on any given thing because we've bounced around a little bit. However, it's not impossible. And even if you're a generalist, there are still things within that you specialize. Like, for example, maybe you are a program manager who builds programs, but with limited resources and direction. So you're really good at coming in with like sticks and stones and building an entire program from scratch with almost nothing. That's still a specialization, right? Because not everybody's good at coming in and founding things or starting stuff from scratch. So there's still opportunities for you, but it's something that I want to bring up, is that generalists sometimes tend to maybe have too broad of a resume and it can cause challenges. So I think the world is a little bit more open to specialization. And so wherever you can try and specialize in your brand and on your resume, I think you're doing yourself a favor. Okay. So along hand in hand with that is differentiation, right? So even within your field, no matter what it is you're doing, you have lots of people who also have the same or similar skill set to you. And I use the analogy here of cereal, right? Because cereal as a general category actually has quite a lot of different varieties of cereal within it. So on the left here, you have Fruit Loops. It's fun, it's sweet, it's colorful, just it's obviously tailored to a certain audience, which is kids, right? And then on the right, you have oatmeal, which is hearty, it fills you up, It's super inexpensive. It's good for you. It lowers your cholesterol. Anybody over 40 knows how oatmeal lowers your cholesterol. So it's definitely targeted to a certain audience and it appeals to a certain crowd. And that's what you're wanting to do within yourself, because within your job search, because if you're a program manager, you have a lot of generalizable skills that can allow you to manage a program or manage a project in a lot of different fields and a lot of different areas. But there are some things that you're just specifically good at, and that's what you want to zone in on, and that's what you want to sell yourself on for a couple different reasons. One, because it's more interesting than somebody who's just kind of all over the board. It's more interesting than saying, hey, I'm serial. I'm a project manager. You talk about the things that you're really good at, it helps you get a better fit for your job that you want to get, right? Because if you're laser focused on what you're good at and what you want to do and the exact kinds of problems that you solve, you're more likely to get into a role that where you can do those kinds of things. So think about yourself a little bit. Are you a Fruit Loops or are you oatmeal? Like, what are you within that category? Because that can help you to be more competitive, actually. Because if you're competing with Fruit Loops when you're really oatmeal, you're doing yourself a disservice. So think about what you want to be and what you are, and then you'll only have to compete with a smaller group of other candidates that are the same as you, because you are special. You may be a software engineer, and there's lots of software engineers, but you do have things that make you special and differentiate you from other software engineers. So have a think about that. I've been talking for a good long bit here, so I'm just going to pause. Everybody good? Thumbs up, or do we have any questions at this moment? Let me take a breath for a second. Okay, I'm getting lots of thumbs up. Okay, so we will keep going. We will keep plowing through here. Okay, so along with differentiation comes specificity. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is my favorite slide. And if any of you come to me later and you have the phrase excellent communicator on your resume, I will have failed at teaching you about writing resumes. So if you have excellent communicator on your resume, that's okay, but we want to move away from that and we want to try to be more specific in what we say on our resume. So excellent communicator is an example of kind of a watered down, generic, boring thing that a lot of people put on their resume. And to be fair, I see it in job postings almost as much as I see it in resumes, where people will put on a job posting that they're looking for excellent communicator. But almost guarantee that if you put excellent communicator on your resume, what you're communicating to me is that you actually are not excellent communicator, or you haven't done a deep enough dive on what that actually means, because that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And if you get more specific about what your communication skills are and what you're actually good at, you're going to have a better job of selling yourself for the right fitting role than if you just stick to generic, boring stuff like excellent communicator. Okay, so I've got a whole list here of really great communication skills that are all different. Persuasion and influence. Are you able to articulate ideas in a way that motivates others to agree? Can you get people to sign on? Are you good at selling? That's a specific communication skill. Are you good at presenting in public speaking, right? Do you have the stomach to get up in front of a room of 1,000 people and confidently and clearly speak to them on a topic? Or do you have empathy and emotional intelligence? You are able to understand the perspectives and the emotions of other people. Are you able to build trust? Or maybe you're able to navigate and resolve disagreements and misunderstandings constructively. You're the person who can come in and solve the snarl. Or maybe you cut through ambiguity, right? You ask great questions. One of my colleagues, Meghna, I come to her all the time with these great ideas that I have. I'm so visionary, and I'm coming to her with these brilliant ideas I have. And one of my favorite things that she always says is, but Jess, what about X? What about Y? What about Z? She comes up with these brilliant questions that I wasn't even able to think of. And so this is just like a communication superpower of hers, is that she's able to ask questions that nobody else thinks of. So when you think about your skills, think about what it actually means in the world and get as specific as you can. Because you see, all of these are communication skills, but not everybody has all of these, right? I'll come in here and do public speaking and talk. I don't have any kind of fear of speaking to groups, but I hate selling. I don't want to persuade anyone to do anything. I hate it so much, but I love coming in and talking about things and sharing knowledge and sharing information. And some people are amazing at conflict resolution. So this is just one example. When you're looking at your resume, when you're talking about detail oriented is another one, right? What does that actually mean? Are you really good with numbers? Are you really good at telling stories with data? Are you really good at finding mistakes? Like, you're really good at copywriting? Break things down. And there's an expression for writers of show, don't tell. So you want to show that you're an excellent communicator instead of telling you're an excellent communicator. So that's what I'm trying to get at. When you tell someone you're an excellent communicator, it doesn't have as much impact as showing how you're an excellent communicator. And that's what being specific does. So try and aim for that. If anybody shows me their resume, please make sure you take off excellent communicator and replace it with specific communication skills. Okay, so I've talked about some of the challenges that people have with writing their brand, and I've let you know what it is. So what are some ways for you to develop your personal brand? What are some tools? Well, I got you. There are tons of ways that you can do it, right? One of my favorite, which is super fun, is this website called 16personalities.com. And it is kind of a Myers-Briggs. It's like a big 5 personality test. It maybe takes 10 minutes, but it's really fun. And you can see here on the picture is actually my 16 personalities, or Big 5, which is an INTJ. You guys are probably all familiar with that, but it has verbiage that goes along. It talks about it. And so you can go in there and say, oh yeah, I am a little bit of an introvert, or I'm an extrovert, or I'm definitely a thinking person, or that. And it can give you a sense of who you are. It's fun, it's free. And if it's not you, if it's not right, that is totally fine. Because what you can do is go look at the other ones and say, actually, this one suits me a little bit better. And that can help you dial stuff in. I talked about getting in touch with your values. Value card sorts are amazing. There's tons of free ones online as well. You can do a Google search for value card sorts. And what that means is it's like a little exercise. It usually takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes tops, where you go and you're confronted with cards that have different values. So my top 3 values are health, connections with other people, and then my time, right? I really value those 3 things. But you could value faith, you could value awards, you can value excellence. There's like a whole bunch of them. And then you just sort it, and it'll help you to narrow down to what are your most important, maybe your most important 3 or your most important 5. Here's why I think this is super important. Okay. Like, you think about it, like, in our careers, a lot of times we're trying to progress. We're trying to be better, get better, make more money, blah, 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 blah. But do we actually stop and sit down and think about what is most important to us and how we define success? So, for example, I personally never, ever want to be a CEO. Like, it sounds great on paper, right? Oh, you can make lots of money, you have lots of responsibility, you get to actually move the needle on stuff, you have a lot of people who report to you and depend on you and rely on your important decisions, maybe you get a lot of press coverage, you become famous. I don't want any of those things at all. One of my most important, most tightly held values is my time. And honestly, I feel more of a success to go walk my dog along the river every day than I ever would to go wake up in the morning and spend 10 hours making decisions. So knowing those kinds of things about yourself and getting real about them can really help you, because if I am confronted with a job that looks really great on paper, uses a lot of my skills, it would be something that I'd probably be good at, but it requires that I am in meetings all day, every day, back to back. That is going to be terrible for me. So I use my values to kind of guide what kinds of things that I want to do as much as possible, because I know that going away from my values is going to make me really unhappy. Man, it must have been 20 years ago now. I was right out of college, or right before I graduated from college. I was looking for any job, because when you're young, sometimes you can get a little bit desperate for getting a job and getting money. So I applied for this job that kind of said it was one thing on paper, and then when I got there, I actually realized that it was basically sales. It was basically phone sales. And as soon as I realized what it was, I knew that I was never going to be good at it. I was never going to care about it. And so I had to give notice and do something else, because it would have been a disaster for everybody. It would have been a disaster for that company. It would have been miserable for me. So that's why I say, know your values, know what's important to you, know what's your vision for your career, because that will help guide you through the decisions that you're going to make. Standout is an older book, but that's available. That has a test you can do online as well. That one costs, I think it's like $15 for the book. So it's not necessarily one I would prioritize. Adjectives lists. These are great. So I mentioned that I wrote a book. My book has adjective lists, but you could also do a Google search for adjective lists and get free ones right now. Or you could do chat GPT, give me a list of 100 adjectives to use on my resume, and you can do it free. And what I like about adjective lists is you could just read it and look at the list and say, does that apply to me? No, that doesn't. Yes, that does. And sometimes you get words that you wouldn't necessarily use to describe yourself, but really are very valuable to you, and help you think, get out of the box a little bit, because maybe we get a little bit reductive, or we get a little bit narrow in our thinking. And so adjective lists, you can just look through there and see words that you might not use. Love It or Loathe It, I think, is a Franklin Covey exercise, and it's not in my book, but it is available online. But what you could basically do is, for a week, get a piece of paper out, and on half of the page, you write down everything that you do that you love. And it could be work, or it could be personal life. I hate spreadsheets. I love folding clean laundry, whatever it is. And then on the loathe it, all the things that you hate. I hate doing dishes. I hate sitting in meetings for an hour, whatever it is. And then over the week, you go look at what was on there, and you try to look at trends of things that you really like doing and things that you don't. And then try and see how that might be a job that you might like, right? So for example, I really like sharing information and knowledge. So this is what I'm doing with myself, right? I'm putting together a class. I love it. It's something that I want to get better at. So you can use that as an exercise to help you kind of suss things out and see trends. Flatter yourself and critique yourself is in my book. And it's very similar to Love It or Loathe It, but it's more of just a discrete exercise. So again, get out a piece of paper. On the flatter yourself side, I want you to think about all the things that are great about yourself. And again, this is not for anybody else. No one has to see it. It's just for you. You can throw it away. You can burn it, but it's an exercise for you. Take 5 minutes. Really be your best friend, right? All the best qualities you have. Oh, I'm so good at picking gifts for my friends. I'm so thoughtful. Oh, I'm so good at putting together slide decks. Whatever it is, just lay it on thick. I mean, just be so wonderful to yourself. And then on the critique yourself side, it's 5 minutes. And this is not rain fire on yourself. This is not, things you don't like about yourself necessarily. What this is more about things that you don't want to devote time to getting better at. So there are things you don't like to do, and everybody can get better at anything, right? You can build any skill, but there's some things you just don't want to, you don't care about. I do not like getting up early in the morning, and I have done it. I have hated it every time I've done it. I really am my best version of myself from like 10 in the morning to like 4 in the afternoon. I'm a middle of the day person. I know that about myself. I've tried to fight that so many times. I've had 6 a.m. meetings. I've had jobs where it was required. I've had jobs where I was on call, and I just hate it. So knowing that, I will avoid doing those things I don't want to do. And I'm trying to look for jobs where I'm going to mostly be doing things that I like and avoiding stuff that I don't like. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be 100%. But the closer you can get to being able to be your true self at work, the happier you're gonna be. So tons of resources. Most of the stuff is free. Takes a piece of paper. Tons of stuff you can do to try to do an exercise to get some sense of who you are. And honestly, most of the stuff you could probably do every single thing on this list and it would take you less than 2 hours. So think about that. One last thing actually that came to my mind. So we mentioned, right, that question earlier of what is your reputation? What do people think of you? Easy way to find out, and that is to ask people. And if you have the tracker that I shared yesterday, there's even a section on it, like an exercise to go and basically just ask people what they think of you. And you can frame it around, hey, I need words for my resume. I'm working on my personal brand. I'm writing my resume. Could you please give me 3 words that you would use to describe me, and see what comes up? And I'll tell you, sometimes they come back with stuff and you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I think about myself. But sometimes people come back with stuff that you would never think of, but is really great. And I'll use an example. I was working with a client the other day, and she was kind of having trouble describing herself. And so I'm listening to her, and she's telling me her career story. And, I was trying to throw words at her that would describe her. I said, would you say that you were astute? Would you say that you're shrewd? Like, what words would you use? And then later it came to me, this girl is charismatic. She's got so much charisma. She's got the riz, as the kids say. And so we came up with, a great way of describing her in her resume. She would not have said that she was charismatic, but man, that lady was charismatic. So see what the people in your world think about you. It could be colleagues, it could be people in your regular life, your spouse, your partner, your kid. Just make sure that when you're asking them, you're like, I need this for a professional reason. What are a couple words that you'd use to describe me? And see what they say. It could be really helpful for you to get an idea of your reputation. You could ask maybe three, 4, 5 people and see what you get. We're looking good. I heard some weird noise, but it looks like we're good. Okay. Moving on. All right, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the personal value proposition, or what we call the elevator pitch. So we've talked about like how to kind of get a personal brand, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to share your personal brand with other people. Now, you're going to share your brand in your resume and in your LinkedIn, those kinds of things, but the elevator pitch is specific to a verbal way of sharing your information, sharing yourself with other people. And here's the takeaways for your personal value proposition, right? You want to take some time to think about it ahead of time and write it down. I guarantee you somebody else on the bridge has done what I have done in the past. Jess, what do you do for a living? What do you do for work? Oh, I work at Intel. I said that a million times. Does that say anything about what I do? Not at all, because so many people do so many things at Intel. It doesn't tell anybody skills. It doesn't tell anybody abilities. It doesn't tell anybody about what I'm good at or what I might want to do later. It's just a lazy answer. So if you take time to think and write it down, you're much more likely to be able to come up with something intelligent, and useful to you because you thought about it ahead of time. You're going to want to practice this a lot, and you're not going to just practice it with one kind of person, but you're going to practice introducing yourself to many different kinds of people, because the elevator pitch might be a little bit different depending on if you're in an elevator with Jess, or you're in a phone call with Bill Gates, or you're at a backyard barbecue. Like, there's different ways and different skills, and you might not be good at it right away, but you can get a little bit more agile about tailoring it to the person that you're talking to, right? Does this person work in tech? Then you can probably use a little bit more jargon. But if they are non-technical, then you need to kind of right size the message so that they understand what you're talking about. And by the way, I once told someone that I work at Intel, and they did not know what Intel was. So I really put my foot in it, just assuming that everyone knew what Intel was. And so then I spend all this time just discussing what Intel is and nothing about who I am or what I do. So way off the page there. Lastly, you're going to want to be clear, crisp, and concise with your message, because people have a very limited window of attention, especially nowadays. Oh my gosh, I am listening. Go ahead, tell me about yourself. People are not paying attention. They want to, but they can't. So let's do an exercise real quickly here in the chat. For those of you who were in this session yesterday, does anyone want to jump into chat and tell us anything you remember about what I said about myself yesterday? Remember, I had a slide and I introduced myself a little bit. Does anyone remember anything I said about myself yesterday? Abe, go ahead. Do you remember?
I don't know if this counts as cheating remembering, because I have written notes. I wrote that you worked at Intel in HR under a program called Blue Hire for approximately 13 years, and you currently live in Porto, Portugal. You moved there after leaving Intel.
Thanks, Abe. So actually, I'm seeing a bunch of people chatting. They're remembering things. A little bit of a disadvantage because I did have you as a captive audience, but probably realistically, not even Abe, who wrote things down, got everything that I said about myself. So you want to think about like being real specific. And I was intentional, by the way, about what those things were I was saying about myself, because I wanted you to know that nobody here said that I was a professional resume writer, but that's really important because I want you to listen to me when I'm talking about resumes. But I was kind of specific in some of the things that I said. So thanks for that, Abe. It is a little bit cheating taking notes because we're not going to do that generally when we're talking to people. But it is a good example of when you're networking on the phone or in the world, later go take notes, because it will be good for you to remember about other people. It'll be helpful to you. But generally speaking, people are not going to do that. They're going to remember one or two things about you at most. So you want to make it count. Okay. So elevator pitch, just to say it again, it's kind of this 30-second introduction that really answers these basic questions. Who are you? What do you do? And what do you want, right? Because we're looking for a job, so we're being specific in our message. And I'm going to show you an example on another slide, so don't worry about it. But you really want to be able to hit them with a couple of things. Who you are, what do you do, and what do you want, right? 30 seconds is kind of that moment when you're in the elevator, that analogy. You're only going to have someone's attention for a couple minutes at most. But you can also tell a version of your elevator pitch in interviews, and it can be longer. So almost guaranteed, every interview that you're going to go into, they're going to say, tell us about yourself, or tell me about yourself. That's basically a prompt for you to give your elevator pitch. And in that circumstance, it can be longer, right? It could be 2 minutes probably of you talking about who you are, what you've done, what you're going for, why this company. So it can be longer, but it is an example of how you're going to have different versions of this. Tomorrow, when we talk about resume, It's going to look really familiar to you in the form of the executive summary on your resume. And so that's why branding is so important, right? Because all of these things are little versions of the same thing. What you say about yourself verbally is going to be very similar maybe to your executive summary on your resume or your about me on LinkedIn. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be some version of it. And so writing it down and practicing it helps you get comfortable with your message. Okay, so, why did we need to be good? Just for the reason that I told you. Hey, Jess, what is it that you do? Oh, I work at Intel. You're not building any confidence. You're not really making much of an impression. You're not really creating any interest. And maybe they remember that you work at Intel. But it's an opportunity for you to, this is what I do. I'm so confident about, my abilities. You come in and you know what you want to say about yourself. You're going to make a good impression, right? Because you're going to talk maybe about accomplishments, or you're going to talk about skills. So people remember, Jess is really good at writing resumes. So when they need somebody who writes resumes, they're going to think Jess, resume, Jess. Creating interest. Maybe you're talking about something really interesting and they're going to want to talk to you later, right? Maybe that is that elevator pitch in an interview. They want to talk more about stuff you've done. Or maybe you're introducing yourself to a new networking contact. You want to talk to them more. I use this a lot, but I used to be a beekeeper. And if I mention beekeeping, almost guaranteed someone wants to talk more to me about keeping bees. It's not an example for work, but it is an example of I've got a hook here that people want to talk to me more. So what is that about your work that's interesting? Because I'm guaranteed, sure, that if I talk to any one of you in a one-to-one conversation, you're doing something interesting. So what is that interesting thing that you're doing that you want to get people to want to talk to you about? And being memorable. Remember, you want them to walk away from talking to you remembering a couple key things. Jess writes resumes. She used to work in HR at Intel. She lives in Porto. Whatever it may be, you want to be able to memorize it so that when they walk away, they remember you. Okay, so what do you say? So remember, we were talking about who you are, what it is you've been doing, what are you good at, and what's your objective. So I wrote this example here, and I'm going to read it out loud. I know that's boring, but I'm going to do it. It took me 7 years at Intel to master the art of transforming complex data into powerful business assets. Okay, so this person's talking about how long they were at Intel, what they were doing. I'm a senior data architect, and I lead high-impact projects, including building a data warehouse that processes over 10 million records daily, driving a 30% increase in operational efficiency. I also spearheaded a cloud migration that reduced infrastructure costs by 25% and enabled real-time analytics, leading to faster decision-making. Okay, and then this person ends it with, now I'm eager to bring this expertise to a startup where I can drive data strategy from the ground up and help fuel rapid growth. So this person's talked about what they've been doing with their time. They talked about how they're mastering their skills, right? What did they build? They built a data warehouse. They spearheaded a cloud migration. He's got some numbers. This person's got some numbers in here, he or she. They increased operational efficiency by 30%. I maybe wouldn't put all of these stats in there, maybe just stick with one, but they've got a objective at the end, right? I really want to go to a startup so that I can build something from the ground up. So when I'm talking about what do you want to do with yourself? What is your vision for your career? Where do you want to go? Tell people. Now, it's not saying, hey, I'm really hoping that you can get me a job, or I'm really hoping that you even know somebody that I can talk to necessarily, but you're saying where you want to go. So now that person knows a little bit about you, where you've been and where you're going. And by the way, you can get really direct. You can say, hey, I would love to sit down and have a chat with you about working at Google, or I'm trying to break into startups. Do you know anybody who works at a startup that I could talk to? You can get real specific in that way if you want. I will say, when you're looking for a job, you usually have a couple of objectives besides the final objective of getting a job. You want to meet new people and you want to get information. Those are the things that are valuable to you when you're looking for a job search, right? Information about companies or places where there might be opportunities or new people to talk to. Maybe there's somebody working in a space of interest for you, or maybe they have insights about hiring at another company. So it's people and information, but you can also have your objective as something specific, like I'm trying to break into dance at Radio City Music Hall. Whatever it is, you can get specific, but if you are specific, it's helpful to that person, because if it comes up later, oh, who did I know that wanted to dance at Radio City Music Hall? Oh, Jess. So getting specific, practicing, and like I said, it's going to be different for different people. This one might be an example where you're really specifically talking to another person in tech, so they understand what a data architect is, they understand what those impacts are, and you'll have to play with it and right size it to get it to the right audience. And that's going to take some practice. Okay, what really matters? It's not so much your word choice, so don't feel like you have to go recite Shakespeare. You're writing things down and you're practicing, not so that you're saying it verbatim, but that you're getting the right gist of what you're saying. Your tone matters. Your body language matters. So I highly suggest that you record yourself so you know what you sound like. Ask people for feedback. Hey, Sam, I'm going to do my elevator pitch. Would you mind giving me some feedback and seeing what it's like? So remember, how you're saying things and your body language matters. If you're excited about data centers, building data centers, it's going to show in your body and the way you say it. So don't get stuck on trying to remember it word for word. Be genuine, be yourself, try to be friendly, be enthusiastic. And it should help if you think about what it is you want to say, that you can be enthusiastic about it. I hope that you are looking for a job that you genuinely are excited about. Eye contact, really important, right? See how your message is landing. Are they hearing you? Sometimes people might not even hear you, and they're going to be too polite to tell you, hey, I can't hear what you're saying. So look at them. And I'm going to call out the people in the Pacific Northwest, because I'm from Oregon originally. We don't do eye contact very well. So practice getting comfortable with it a little bit, making sure that people are seeing you. If you're doing it on video or if you're doing it face-to-face, that people are getting your message. Number one thing that people do that I see with an elevator pitch is talking too much, just rambling, just going on and on, either because they haven't practiced and they haven't prepared, or because they're trying to squeeze in every single thing they've ever done into 30 seconds. So get to the point. Remember, they're only going to remember a couple things about you, so don't drown yourself out with talking about everything that you're good at. Avoid jargon if you're not talking to somebody who's in the same field as you. They don't know. If you know that they know, then go ahead, use whatever you need. Again, be punchy, right? What is it do you want to remember about you? Say it and get out. Lastly, practice it. Practice it 100 times. Say it till you feel comfortable saying it, so the things that you're talking about roll off the tongue easily. Record yourself so you know what you look like. Do it to different people. Again, remember my story from yesterday when I was talking about networking. I said, I literally said to people, hey, can I practice networking with you? You could do the same thing with your elevator pitch. Hey, would you mind letting me introduce myself? I need to practice. The other thing is, we're going to talk about it in interview, but it's a really good idea for you to start doing mock interviews. If you think you're going to be doing interviews anytime soon, mock interviews are huge. Grab a colleague, grab a friend, grab somebody, and ask them to do a mock interview with you. I've got a mock interview questions in my book. I just posted on LinkedIn about it, but you can Google 10 most common interview questions and put it out there, or you can try and anticipate questions you think you're going to get in interviews. Have your person ask you those questions so that you can practice, but you're always going to get asked to introduce yourself. So at the very least, practice that. And you're going to maybe think this sounds a little dopey, but back in my day when I was in Blue Hire, I would drive to work and I would practice my elevator pitch just in the car. I probably looked really silly talking to myself in the car, but I knew that as somebody who worked in Blue Hire, I was going to have to do a lot of elevator pitches. So you're going to be looking for work. You're going to have to introduce yourself. So get real comfortable with it. Okay, final takeaways. Remember, your brand has an impact on every part of your search. So it is a really good idea for you to take some time, 2 hours, maybe a couple hours at least, to know yourself, who you are, what you're good at, what you've been doing, and what you want. There's lots of tools we talked about for you to use to kind of suss out what those things are, get a sense for yourself. You probably do already have some level of self-awareness, but it may be worth writing it down. You need a good elevator pitch to introduce yourself. So practice, and practice with different people so you get comfortable telling different versions of it. With that, I'm going to stop talking. Reminder that all of the materials are shared on the website. So you can go to jrtruman.com and you can get a copy of the slide deck if you need. I will record this video, or it's been recording, and I will post it later after. It takes a little bit of time, like an hour or two, but once it generates, I will post that on YouTube as well, and I'll send the link so you have a copy of the recording if you want to rewatch it for something later. With that, I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording, and we will open it up for private Q&A. Let me stop recording here.